This is Power Athlete Radio. With your hosts, Denny K, Professor Booty, and the Luke Summers. And now, toes forward, hips locked, shoulders set, and retract those scapulars. It's time for some knowledge bombs.
Thanks for tuning into Power Athlete Radio. This week we bring back our dear friend and colleague Dr. Tom Incledon of Human Performance Specialists. As is the style of our resident mad scientist, Tom brings us the latest findings of his research involving a phenomena called the neuromatrix. Essentially, the brain and gut are connected by chemical reactions and nervous system impulses. While we've spent plenty of time discussing the relationship between the two with past guests, Tom brings forth a new take on the body's ability to communicate signs and symptoms. If you live with pain, it may be far more complicated than acute or chronic injury. According to the neuromatrix, many other factors may be contributing to the feeling or sensation of pain, particularly as it pertains to your training. Physiologically, we experience pain like any other naturally occurring sense. But just as those senses are subject to heightening or lessening, so too is our individual pain response. There's so much fascinating discussion coming your way in just a moment. This is episode 145.
Power Athlete Nation, what is up? You're here with John and Luke, and we have spent the past 3 days in Scottsdale, Arizona. We've been at Human Performance Specialist with our good friend and mad scientist, Dr. Tom Cosby Incledon.
I'm going to start thinking that's my real name now.
But no, we're excited to be here. We've been in and out of all sorts of crazy stuff in terms of the discussions we've had over dinner after a glass of wine or two, and then in the gym just a second ago. We were doing a bunch of occlusion stuff, but
the blood work and
we've been getting
all the different treatments and everything that we've been doing. So Tom, leads the world in terms of human performance specialists, and that's the name of his company. But really, Human Performance is where he is. Cut his teeth and really, has his credentials and has more information, and just more data than any human being on the planet, and really knows more about it. It's really his passion. So, you guys have heard Tom on the podcast before. I mean, we've been friends for, well over a decade. I mean, coming up on almost 15 years we've been friends. So it's exciting to see how everything's grown over the years, and we got a chance to come out here and do our annual pilgrimage out here. I mean, hopefully twice a year to give blood and make sure we stay ahead of the curve. Kind of like preventive maintenance on your car. You don't want to change the oil or change the brakes or figure out something's wrong in your car when the check engine light comes on. So much like your body, you need to stay ahead, get blood work done, regular chiropractic care, and really address any injuries or any problems that kind of come up. And I just love to sweep them under the floor, pretend they don't exist, but unfortunately they come back really nasty, and then you got to end up somewhere like here and hope to have Tom come fix you. So Tom, thanks for joining us on the podcast, and we're really excited to see you.
Same here.
What's exciting, not to cut you off there, Tom, I'll let you kind of expand on this. We were walking to lunch the other day, and you had said something like, if 10 years from now I still think then what I'm thinking today, I've done something wrong. Yeah. So I think you've kind of ventured into the more of a neurological side of performance, and I'll just kind of let you go.
Sure. So basically what I was sharing with you while we were walking is that a lot of people fear change. They kind of have a mindset or philosophy, and they kind of hold on to that the rest of their lives. And by doing that, they're shortchanging themselves of all the cool stuff that's coming out, which basically means you have to change. You have to change how you think. You have to change how you approach your problem solving and stuff like that. And otherwise, you just get left behind because the rest of the world is not waiting for you. They're going to keep moving ahead. And I've recently got exposed to a lot of, I would say, they're new concepts for me in terms of incorporating them into either training athletes or to patient care with the doctors here that see our patients. But the concepts themselves have actually been around for a while, in some cases more than 20 years. But almost every single human being, this means every doctor, every physical therapist, athletic trainer, everybody that I've been encountering, when I start talking about this stuff, they all seem surprised, like they never heard of it before. And what that reminds me is that I could literally go and look for something today, like on Medline or PubMed or some sort of international medical database. And maybe today I don't find a lot of research. And then a month from now, there could be like 4,000 studies. Like things just are changing exponentially. And it's really a challenge to stay up to date with so many things. So like most people, I look at the stuff that I've always was excited about, and so a lot of what determines where I'm going is kind of like the patient that's in front of me, or whatever problem I'm trying to solve in front of me, that's what gets my attention. So I've ignored a lot of my own sort of, I don't know if I would say health issues, but I would say orthopedic issues for sure. So my hips definitely need improvement. I would say left hip, left shoulder, right knee definitely need some improvement. And then recently I was interacting with some colleagues, and they reminded me about a guy that I heard about like maybe 10 years ago. And so a guy by the name of Ralph Charlton, Ralph's sort of like a business. I met him years ago through Tim Larkin. And Ralph's like, hey, you should check out this Dr. Cobb from Z Health. And I honestly fully intended to meet Dr. Cobb and see what's going on. But like everybody else, I got a million things going on. It's like life kicks in. And now here we are, like it's actually more than 10 years later. Uh-huh. And I was in another business program. I was in a program called Strategic Coach, which I think is an incredible program. It's really helped me a lot with growing my business. And while I was there, I met a woman by the name of Kathy, who's basically with Z Health. And Kathy and I, we knew each other, professionally, and but we'd only see each other like in professional circles when it's like once a year or once every so many months. And Kathy was like, hey, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that, I'm noticing some things, and should think about some stuff. And before that, I actually had Eric assess me and gave me some stuff that helped me quite a bit. But I didn't have like that pain at the time anymore, so I kind of moved on into different directions. So I wound up, after reconnecting with Kathy, I started utilizing some of their professionals to work with some of the patients here that I thought could really benefit from that type of care. And I saw some really amazing results. I saw stuff that I thought, wow, it was really like it could help me take our patient outcomes to another level. So I said, all right, I'm going to just...
So what kind of stuff did you see?
So basically, they do a lot of exercise that look at how does the nervous system perceive certain things as a threat, and then how to counter that or improve upon it. And so an example would be someone is in pain, maybe typically abdominal pain or maybe like a shoulder pain, and then they go and they do an assessment, and that same person has in all this pain say, hey, I feel great. I don't have any pain anymore. And we're talking like seconds, a minute, like very short. And what they require a lot of drugs, a lot of supplementation, or any like long-term strategy. Or sometimes I see like professionals like, let's see what happens in 3 months. Well, the guy's in pain at this instant. Mm-hmm. And it's not very satisfying to anyone to say, let's see what happens 3 months from now when you're in pain at this instant. And that's why drugs become so popular, because you could literally get rid of pain pretty quickly. And what I really liked about some of the stuff they were sharing with me, didn't require any drugs at all. And if anything, people take reduced their intake of drugs. So I started learning about this concept called the neuromatrix theory of pain, and other concepts about pain gating and stuff like that. And I started at the same time also getting a lot of patients with really significant pain in their digestive tract. And they had colonoscopies and they had endoscopies. So there was no structural damage that could be found on imaging with their GI tract. And their doctors had diagnosed them. So the doctors diagnosed these particular patients with IBS. And so when they came to me, so they had like a lot of work done by different professionals. And I looked over the scans. I thought the scans were done correctly. So then I said, well, I noticed that none of the gastroenterologists have done any extensive stool testing to see anything there. So I said, we can do some stool testing. And I found there were definitely some microorganisms that don't belong there. but there were no signs of any of the chemicals that you would use to diagnose someone with IBS. So basically, I didn't really see huge levels of inflammation or damage of any kind. And so, but these people had lots of pain. And I believe them. I don't think they were lying or anything. So then I started looking up stuff about pain and the GI tract and this concept of the neuromatrix theory. And what I started seeing is that we produce chemicals in the gut, and that would mean like the stomach, small intestine, large intestine, that are structurally the same as chemicals in our brain.
Power Athlete Nation, we are interrupting your regular programming to bring you the launch of Form Collar. We've worked with the team from Form Lifting to develop what we believe is one of the most essential training aids for any coach or athlete. The device attaches to the barbell like any other collar and measures force, speed, acceleration, and power, and sends this info to your smartphone instantaneously as you train. Yes, there's an app for that. Unlike any other wearables we've tested, the metrics provided are accurate and meaningful and provide yet another layer to your training that will help drive more effective power, strength, and speed adaptations. Having instantaneous access to info like this during your training is a pure game changer. Make sure you guys head over to pahq.co/form lift. That's capital F ORM, capital LIFT, for more information on how you can get your Form Collar. Now back to the show.
Now, if those chemicals are produced by a brain cell or a neuron, we call them a neurotransmitter. If those same exact chemicals are produced by another tissue, we call them a biogenic amine. And not many people know biogenic amine as a phrase or a concept, right? It's not a household word or something. So as I started looking at this stuff, what I basically started seeing, it's like a two-way street. Your gut and your brain are communicating. As I started looking at certain things, I realized that I think a lot of these people had GI pain because of issues going on in the brain. I also think other people may have some brain, like some psychiatric, psychological issues based on stuff going on in their gut. Yet when I look at how the professionals were treating them, they were treating them in a very isolated fashion, like, okay, pain's in your gut, so I'm going to I'm going to give you a drug for your gut.
Pull out 8 inches of your colon.
Right, remove your colon, something like that. So I was like, this doesn't seem to be a smart strategy based on my interpretation of looking at all these studies. So I had taken some workshops through Z Health, which is this company that Dr. Cobb has with Kathy. And I started learning some stuff, and I'm certainly let's just say I'm very low on the learning curve at this point. But just a little bit that I learned, I was able to do some initial sort of assessments with these guys, share those assessments with our doctors here, and they can confirm, this stuff is real. It does exist for these patients. And so it's opened up basically new ways to help get rid of pain for people. And so my initial exposure was, let's say, people with gastrointestinal pain. And then we started looking at some of the athletes with say, orthopedic pain, and this includes now myself.
And I'm going to cut you off right there for anyone that maybe hasn't listened to your previous episode or interview or episode on our podcast. Talk about the people who walk through your door here at your facility.
Yeah. So historically, we started working with elite athletes, primarily NFL guys and Major League Baseball guys. Over the years, we've worked with athletes from every single sport. And at that point, most of our cases were just guys that were basically healthy but wanted to take their performance to the next level. And that was like the late 80s, early 90s. And then over the years, I had friendships with these guys, and I started having health issues, or their family would have health issues. And as our company grew, we had more doctors sort of on staff or different professionals we'd work with. We started getting more into areas of health, more so than performance. Uh-huh. And we started seeing as lots of people have, just things going on that no one ever took the time to evaluate and measure. And so common things would be like micronutrient issues. They would have some type of pathogenic component in their digestive tract. Could be from training, could be from a weak immune system. Then we started seeing hormone issues. I've seen all kinds of things with guys with neurotransmitter imbalances. And so I would say...
And probably a combination or symphony of all those things, right? Yeah. So to decode that is...
It's complicated.
Yeah. You're not going to walk into the urgent care down the street and they're not going to be able to call that out.
Yeah, and so the challenge is right now. So I'm going to limit this statement to the United States only. I'm not going to talk about other countries. We have clients flying from all over the world. But in the United States right now, the average physician has to see a patient in less than 15 minutes. So the average doctor spends 9 to 15 minutes with a patient. If they spend more time in that, it's not profitable for them given the current insurance model. So essentially, under Obamacare, thanks President Obama, we've now created a factory system where it's no longer healthcare. It's a time management system. I got to get you in and get you out so I can see the next guy.
Yeah.
Well, that's the only solution that will work in that model is drugs. And that's why you see this country is the most over-medicated country in the world. And so a lot of the people walk into our doors, they're on way more drugs than they should be on. Mm-hmm. And no one's staying on top of it. What's happening is Dr. A gives you a drug, tells you, all right, you got a problem, see Dr. B. Dr. B gives you a different drug, you see Dr. C. And so part of why I'm really into some of this stuff with the nervous system, if you will, and how the brain perceives things as a threat is you can get really quick change without medication. And I truly believe we can take people off medications. So now we can sort of fight this over-medicated society. I don't think long-term having a society that's over-medicated is going to impede our growth intellectually and professionally. We're not going to have the great scientists come from the U.S. anymore. They're going to come from other places because we're going to make everybody dumber by over-medicating them. Mm-hmm. And so because it's going to be in, these chemicals make their way into the environment and it gets into everybody else. If you look at data across the board, you could test a given human being in the United States right now and probably find up to 2,500 chemicals that do not occur in nature. Wow. So that means we're all being contaminated on a daily basis. So I'm not like super paranoid. I'm not like, hey, you got to be afraid of everything. But I do think we got to start practicing social responsibility and accountability. So every person has to be responsible and accountable to themselves and their family. And then once they get that part of the world figured out, then grow beyond that, mm-hmm. right? Otherwise, it's kind of like you're like poisoning your friends and neighbors without even knowing it. You know what I mean, kind of thing. So to get back on focus about, so the cases we get generally here, they're pretty complicated. And, it takes hours or days just to figure out where to start. But we put together a game plan and then kind of follow through. And what I like about the approaches our doctors here use, there's no pressure. We give people options and they get to be as aggressive or as conservative as they want. And our model is that health should be fun. It should not be scary or fearful, anything like that. And now tying that back into the folks at the podcast about some of the neuromatrix stuff. There's just a lot of really cool stuff out there right now. And so one thing I would encourage everyone, if you buy a computer, just find out for yourself. Just go onto Google and put in, pain and neuromatrix theory. And you're going to see, like on Google Scholar, there's a lot of stuff out there. This is not a new concept, nothing made up. It is fairly complicated. There are some ways, though, that you could simplify it and make it easier. But it's one of those things that as you start dabbling in it and learning more about it, you'll figure out stuff for yourself that will allow you to recover better, will allow you to improve the quality of your training, will allow you to train in a way that doesn't kill yourself. When I was competing years ago, kind of the mindset then was, no pain, no gain, right? And even today, a lot of athletes still practice that. And the thing is, when you're young, you could damage yourself pretty good and still keep moving. But now as time goes on and you have the accumulation of damage and you have experience and wisdom, you start thinking, you know what, maybe if I could figure out a way to make progress without pain, it might be better. Mm-hmm. And then what you see then is you start really changing your approach a lot. So I hope that wasn't too long-winded or stuff, No. As you know, I'm just getting warmed up.
Yeah. Oh. Never at a loss for words.
Maybe again, just tapping back into a little bit of your past. You talked about competing. Talk about some of your accomplishments in the younger days and who you hung with and what you were, So what made you tick and what did you train for?
Yeah, so I did Olympic lifting, I did powerlifting, I did all-around lifting, I did strongman lifting. I love strength sports. I still follow it today. I watch it on different aspects on the web. But I had probably the most fun doing some of the strongman contests. I got a chance to meet all kinds of really cool guys. the guys that got me started were Brian Neese and Chad Coy. And a real funny story was I literally saw them on TV, and I want to say it was like a Friday or Saturday night. And I had to go to an American College of Sports Medicine annual meeting to present some data. And so I saw these big guys on TV competing. And the next day, there was like an exhibit hall. And I saw these same guys at a booth. So it's like I just saw them on TV the night before. And now I'm walking to the exhibit hall. I saw them. And it was like, these were huge guys compared to me. And I was like, I saw Brian. I said, Brian, I just saw you on TV last night. He's like, oh, really? And he was explaining what I was recorded like, months ago and just aired now type of thing. But he's a really cool dude. And I was like, hey, I always want to do this, but I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and I don't want to like kill myself the first workout. It doesn't sound too intelligent, So he's like, hey, why don't you come out and train? And then got started, and I got all kinds of crazy, funny stories after that. But it just things went real well for me. I responded really well, got a chance to meet incredibly strong guys, and Magnus Magnuson, Magnus Samuelsson, Mark Henry, Phil Pfister. I mean, just a ton of guys over the years. I met genetic freaks left and right, I literally met guys that could run with 1,000 pounds like there was nothing there. Just crazy things. I saw guys squat 1,000 pounds or more easily without super suits,
right.
Just cool things. And anyway, so it was a lot of fun. Then over the years, though, I was a really intense competitor. I hate losing, and I wasn't at the point where I would take any drug necessary to win, but I was definitely committed. I was from like a blue collar mindset that if you're better than me, I could just work harder and then catch up and surpass you. And in retrospect, I would say, that maybe was good for a little bit, but what that led to was a lot of overtraining, right? Because I just figured I could compensate by training more or longer. And I wouldn't advise other people to use that same strategy today, right? I would say, you might want to look at it a little differently than I did. But anyway, so that's kind of the background there. Along the way, I was really fortunate enough to study with some of the brightest minds in the world in exercise science at Penn State and University of Miami. I met some really smart guys. A lot of those guys today, they're department chairs or heads at various universities, have TV shows. So these are really bright guys, and I had a chance to like literally study with all these guys over the years and get exposed to all kinds of cool stuff.
All right, so then let's wind this back into kind of what you're geeking out on now, which is this
neuromatrix,
pain neuromatrix theory.
Yeah.
So then So let's go into it. Just give us like the.
So let's just say that a real simple way of maybe explaining it is think of it as the brain is processing information, and whatever the brain or maybe the nervous system might be even a better way of saying it. Whatever the nervous system perceives as maybe a threat or some type of challenge, that could impact then the output side. That output side would be what we perceive as painful, what we perceive as maybe emotionally stressful. So that could affect, are we going to cry? Are we anxious? Are we depressed? Are we motivated? That can affect, do I feel pain or do we feel pain doing something and where that pain is? And then to put some things in perspective, most of the time when someone says, hey, my knee hurts or my stomach hurts or my elbow hurts, when I see a doctor, the doctor then looks at that particular area of the body and tries to, inject or give a pill or do something for that local area. And there's some that's a sound approach from a biomechanical perspective of like, okay, you'd start looking at where the problem is, where the patient perceives a problem. But as you start looking at stuff from more of a neurological perspective, you start saying, well, the brain's responsible for so many different things going on in the human body. And when someone reports something here, how do we know that's the only thing going on? Or that's really where the source of the problem is? You really don't know that sometimes. And so there's ways to kind of assess and evaluate what's going on and compare different parts of the brain and the nervous system. And then from there start creating you could create enough data points to see a pattern. And that helps to guide you what action to take. And those action steps can be very simple corrective exercises that get rid of pain. So along those lines, one of the things I like to do, a lot of people, is I just like to do some sensory deprivation stuff just let them see. I usually record them on their own phone so that way they know it's them and they have proof of it. But just see how they move when you get rid of vision and hearing. Mm-hmm. And you just see everybody does, myself included. They just walk to the left, they walk to the right. So to kind of maybe, I probably didn't do a good enough job explaining it, but it's kind of like I have you wear sound muffs or ear muffs so you can't hear anything, and I have you wear a blindfold type setup so you can't see anything. And I just have you march in place. And what we're trying to see is what does your body do when you can't see or hear? Because you shouldn't move, right? If everything's perfectly balanced, you should stay right there. And what you see is, people walk, they start marching to their left, but they swear they're not moving. Or what sometimes with athletes, what you see is they march to the left, and then once they realize that they have a good body awareness a lot of times, and once they realize they're moving, they then try to make an adjustment. But because they can't see the adjustment visually, they start maybe going in a circle or start maybe going back to the right or something.
I knew I was moving.
Yeah, so spoiler alert, the people Dr. Tom are talking about are John and I.
As we started going, I took probably about maybe 10 steps, and I knew I was moving. I just couldn't tell which direction I was moving.
Okay. I thought for sure I was fucking glued in.
Yeah.
No,
I'm telling you, that's how I was.
I was literally I could feel the steps, and I knew even though my steps feel like there, I just knew spatial relationship. I knew that I was moving, and then I was but I didn't know where I was moving. So then I was trying to correct it and come back, which is why I think I went one way and then I went back the other.
See, I was focused on symmetrical movement patterns. I knew my arms weren't swinging in cadence, so then I tried to correct that. Then my legs were all fucked up, and I guess I wasn't even thinking about. I guess I thought I saw downstream. If my movement cadence was off, then I was going to be moving along the floor. So I'm thinking if I could just stay balanced in my movement, I shouldn't move, which fucking didn't work.
I also felt like a seam in the floor, and I felt the seam on my foot. And then I was maybe if I can just stay on that scene.
Dude,
the problem
he's trying to cheat the system. He's gaming the test.
Well, and then the problem is I lost the seam, and I couldn't find it again. And then I knew I was moving because I had lost the seam. And it was one of those things where I knew I was moving. I tried to correct it. I found the seam. I couldn't find the seam. And I was like, fuck.
See, I thought you just had some epilepsy or something. That's what's going on with your feet. But now I see you're looking for the seam. I see.
Yeah. So I'm using every you take my eyes, my ears. I'm going to use every sense available to me to balance it out.
Well, so the thing that stood out for me, John, when you went is
Cold Blast Coffee is Power Athlete's limited edition dark roast. It's a hardworking, true grit, kick in the door and fire up the machine coffee. Billowing with big, bold flavor, it kicks harder than John Wayne's horse, packs more punch than Bruce Lee, and if Chuck Norris ever approved a coffee, this would be it. We have proudly partnered with Caveman Coffee Co. to bring you this exclusive blend. Only 500 bags exist, so get it while you can at shop.powerathletehq.com. Now back to the show.
You almost immediately took a step forward. The other thing for both of you both started out real slow. So normally I expect athletes to move quicker, right? Uh-huh. I'd expect elderly people to move slow, and I expect athletes.
No. You gotta
Well, when I saw you guys, right. So when I saw you guys, I saw I could have I'm trying to think what it was in your minds, in your brains, and I could see both of you trying to figure out what you're gonna do.
Well, we've done enough of these tests and things to know the idiot that just dives right in, right in and just fucks it all up. Whereas I try to you should go first and let me watch you, and then I'm going to make corrections based off of what you.
That's what I thought I did, and I fucked it up. But go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, the reason why I like to start off with something like that, it's just kind of it's a very fun way to get people aware that there's something off balance or there's something that needs correction, and it's not demeaning or threatening. It's really funny, and you basically got proof for yourself that you could see.
Have you ever seen anybody not move?
Nah, everybody moves. Now I've seen one guy maybe move a little bit. What I've seen a lot of when I have couples come in, so a husband and wife couple comes in. And I've seen so let's say the guy goes first and he's marching in place, and I would see him go to the right, And then the wife goes, she marches to place. I see her go to the left. I just thought, wow, that's just very interesting. It's like they have movement patterns that complement or balance each other out.
I thought they were just trying to get the fuck away from each other.
Well, it depends what side you start.
That
can also be going towards each other.
Like after 60 years, baby, I need a break. So, no, what I kind of almost wonder is like as they're walking holding hands, like do they develop a pattern over time?
Or just watching each other, it would be a mirror image.
Yeah, right? or just you're maybe consciously or subconsciously like using your partner as a guide, let's say. So now when you've removed that stimulus, I mean, I don't know, I'm just kind of guessing now. Sure. I just thought that it was, I've seen it a couple of times and I just thought, I would love to be able to have force platforms and have all kinds of like EEG, EMG type stuff and do a lot of these tests, especially now as I'm reading more things. One of the things that I noticed, and I didn't do this with you guys. I should have done this. We never have enough time every time we get together. It's like we have a million tangents. One of the things I wanted to do is have you guys walk and start asking me questions where you have to process and think it through. So I had, when it was done to me, so most of the time someone asks me a question, I can pretty much process and give an answer fairly quickly. I'm usually pretty good on my feet, but I'm standing still or I'm sitting. So now I'm walking, and of course it was in front of a lot of people, so there's a little bit of that, self-image, self-conscious aspect to it, or nervousness about being in a group. But I had Dr. Cobb ask me questions, and I was like, oh.
It's like, frozen.
Well, it's hard. So how I felt inside didn't match up with the perception people had outside, I think. But in my mind, I actually felt paralyzed. And I didn't feel like I was moving. Now I was still walking. And at some point I probably did stop, but I felt like it was like nothing could happen. Nothing would work, which just shows you how much is going on in the brain that I'm dealing with. The simple question, it's basically stupefied me on the spot.
And what we alluded to when we talked about this at dinner is, a lot of mileage on the joints and that movement pattern, whether it's, farmer's carries or anything from your strongman, where you're using sensory input, what you hear, what you see, to compensate for deficiencies, right? Yeah. So as your brain's calculating that sensory input to compensate to allow you to walk, it's detracting from your ability to process and calculate simple questions, simple math, right?
Yeah, there's like a lot of competition for attention almost, and there's things like people tell me all the time, hey, you're wobbling when you walk. And I'll tell you, I don't feel any wobble at all. But what will happen is if someone points it out, maybe I could temporarily stand up, maybe like walk straighter without wobbling. But that's a very conscious, it's like a mechanical, I'm thinking about what I'm doing type of walk. And walking should not be something you have to think about doing. Walking should be, it just happens like breathing, and your heart rate. It shouldn't be something to think about when there's something going on that's a serious problem.
Unlike other movement patterns, right? Yeah, like you couldn't necessarily replicating the test with other types of movement patterns would be less natural. Yeah. Right. So it wouldn't be indicative. Like a walk should be totally subconscious. Yeah. And shouldn't rob the brain of the ability to process other information. Yeah. Yeah.
Or do, at least basic tasks, like if I ask you the alphabet, like I shouldn't be stumping you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Now I might challenge and say, say every second, a third letter. Or in other words, just break it up just a little bit, but you have enough experience with the alphabet, like it's not like a whole new language or something. Uh-huh. And what you see once there's a little bit of processing, you see a lot of things surface up in people. Sometimes they actually improve, and sometimes, like in my case, I felt like I got a lot worse. Now what it is, what's interesting is when I was going through some assessments. At that point, I would have said I never had an ankle issue or ankle injury. And I started doing some other stuff, and out of nowhere, I had a memory back when I was like 12. I was like, wait a minute, I jacked up my ankles pretty good. I remember playing football, it was like a pickup game of football with some other kids my age. And I remember my one foot was purple or bluish from, tearing something in the injury. But that's so long ago, so 30 years ago. So it wasn't like I remember it so vividly. It was almost like I forgot about it. And it wasn't until something else happened that made me remember it. And as a consequence of remembering that, I did some ankle mobility drills, and after I did the ankle mobility drills, pain in my hip went away. And I've noticed that at any time I have pain in a knee or a hip, for me, I do some simple ankle circles, and I don't have any pain anymore. And people tell me I walk better afterwards. Now, I can't see myself walking, but if we did a video, I could see myself in the video, whatever. So this has got me sort of more open to non-pharmacological ways of helping people improve their gait, improve their joint health. I showed you, the one exercise today where kind of you basically could call like a hip swing, where have your femur resting across that padded bar, and then basically swinging back and forth, almost like a pendulum with your foot. And, then with a little bit of traction, it just helps pull the femur out of the hip a little bit. So the idea is I'm giving it more motion, And John moved really well. We only did one side. We should have maybe, if we had more time, we'd have done the other side too. But a lot is just to get you exposure, so you guys can tinker with it on your own and see some other stuff. As I get some videos, I'll see if I can share them with you guys, because I think it'll help a lot.
So this is all kind of anecdotal stuff in terms of that pain neuromatrix theory, right? And then talk about some of the research or like studies you're talking about, for example, baseball players and other elite athletes.
Yeah, so let's just like...
Well, doesn't it go back to that deal where I think you and I talked about this, where they pulled people off the street and they MRI'd their backs, and they found that, like, of the thousands of people that they did, I mean, it was a huge section study that, like, they brought people in and MRI'd their back and asked them, hey, do you have any back pain? And there were people in there that had bulge collapse discs that never mentioned any back pain. They never, I don't have any back pain, I feel fine. And they had these horrific deals. And Tom talked about one with baseball players and their rotator cuffs. Some people don't realize about most NFL players have a myriad of injuries that most normal people would figure would get them disability and wouldn't go to work. And they're like, how are these guys able to go out and perform and do these things? So I think it goes back to the idea of the best athletes in the world aren't necessarily the best athletes because they have the most raw material, even though they probably do. But it's the best athletes for the world are the ones that are able to solve what I call athletic problems, where an injury comes up and they're able to recruit other muscles, change movement patterns,
or
change
compensate.
motion, or compensate. And it becomes this idea of like, who can compensate the most?
Iterate and compensate consistently, right? Because
everybody's injured, right? So one injury takes a guy off the field. The same injury, all of a sudden, the guy goes out there and scores the winning touchdown, and they're like, "Wow, one injury doesn't affect him." It's just that guy has a more comprehensive, a greater understanding to compensate and to kind of move around these different injuries.
And ultimately, that strategy has a shelf life, though.
Well, it does.
Varying shelf life.
It happened to me. All of a sudden, I go in from starting 16 games, and all of a sudden I go into my 10th year and I get injured, and all of a sudden I could not do it anymore. And it was a weird deal. It was as if like I had compensated to the point where like all of a sudden you start taking things away from me, and I just you strip an athlete down to where they don't have any more available, and then one day they go from being able to play to not being able to play. And I think that's what just happened to me, that all of a sudden enough things get stripped around, and that became part of the reason why I realized like, hey, it's I just can't physically do the job at the level which I want to do it in a time frame that I have to recover. And that's really interesting, especially in athletics, where mentally and emotionally you still want to do it, but you come to this realization that you can't play at the level which you used to play at, and you don't ever want to be that guy who stays too long at the party and I had a lot of ego about how I played the game and the way I approached it and like this level, and anything less than that wasn't okay with me. It wasn't like all of a sudden I was like, hey, okay, you're a decent backup. After starting my whole career, I couldn't go to being a backup. So at that point you're like, hey, I did what I was supposed to do, and I'll go do something else. And then also you start this journey on trying to like heal yourself and try to figure out like, I always laugh at that quote of the Dalai Lama saying that he asked they asked the Dalai Lama what was most confusing for him in life. And he said, man is the most confusing. He said, man spends his whole life chasing money, doing everything to destroy his health. And then once he gets the money, he spends all his money trying to regain his health. And it's a funny quote. I mean, it's so true. People burn the candle at both ends, and all of a sudden they attain this, and then they look and they think, man, I got to go back in time and try to do it, when they probably hadn't gone down that road, they wouldn't be in this pain. So, but I mean, that's really where Tom and I have connected on such a deeper level. It's this idea of, we both had pretty good athletic success. And as a result, you can't get through those type of situations without being in the meat grinder. And then you get out of the meat grinder and then you think to yourself, I still want to train. I still want to do these things, but how do I do these most intelligently? And how do I heal myself? And how do I, hopefully get to the end of this thing with the same parts I started with?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to leave it there. And as always, now it's time for you to empower your performance. Do as the doc says and Google neuromatrix and pain. The information that pops up will amaze you. Don't forget to head to shop.powerathletehq.com for our delicious Cold Blast coffee, and keep your eyes peeled for our new apparel arriving just in time for spring. Until next time, bye!